Settle down, brother. This is the Quarter Report powered by ENCA.com. South Africa is a movie. Welcome to the watch party. Well, we have another political party, this time the Afrika Mayibuye Movement. Floyd Shivambu's political party concretized its manifesto and its constitution over the weekend. It released a logo that it pinky swears is not just a ChatGPT rewrite of the EFF's logo. We'll get into that. It's worth today talking about what this political party says it's going to do, what it says that it stands for, and whether it will make any mark whatsoever or it will go in a similar vein to the trash heap of history in South Africa of big leaders from big parties leaving / being evicted from those parties, trying to start their own thing, and them failing dismally. We're going to get into the Afrika Mayibuye Movement, also known as AMM, or I guess which feels extremely appropriate because that is the exact noise that I made after reading their manifesto this morning. Only one place that you can watch the whole show, which is at the link in the description on ENCA.com if you're watching on YouTube. And also in the link, you can go to www.3beaniesnetwork.com if you want to go buy some merchandise like the merch I'm wearing right now, Settle Down Brother, and the rest. Quick reminder. Floyd Shivambu was one of the crucial organizing creators of the economic freedom fighters. He's credited with fleshing out the structures of the EFF that allowed it to turn from a party of some really charismatic popular leaders, not Floyd Shivambu, Julius Malemas and Ndlozi, into one with proper structures, proper youth and civic organizations with the ability to muster people out to vote and to actually get up to over 10% of everybody who voted in some of the elections, or they were dipped below 10% last time out. Got blown out of the water by the MK Party, who got 50% more votes than them. It's not a small number, by the way. A whole 5% more votes than the EFF did, 14 point something to 9 point something. Pushed the EFF down for the first time ever. Julius Malemas was starting to get more and more antsy and clearly wanting to get rid of some leaders in his party, but there were also some people who were clearly looking at greener grass elsewhere. Floyd Shivambu became the first person to leave. He got headhunted and poached by the MK Party and made their Secretary General. And at the time, it looked like a real coup for the MK Party and a real disaster for the EFF. And later, a bunch of other people would leave the EFF, mostly for MK, although Ndlozi obviously went to Power FM to be a DJ. Sorry, that sounded disparaging. A radio presenter of what I genuinely think is one of the best radio shows in the country. It's just like I don't know. If you say like somebody went to be a DJ, it just sounds like you're being rude. I'm not being rude at all. He hosts an extremely, extremely good show, and he's not a wiki DJ as far as I know. That, by the way, is Julius Malemas. And if you want to see Julius Malemas' ties to some shady individuals, just Google whose wedding Julius Malemas DJ'd at in Europe a few years ago. Very, very interesting appearance from a DJ commander-in-chief at a certain family's certain wedding. Anyway, show's not about that. Floyd Shivambu goes to the MK Party, seen as a huge coup. They're trying to convert charismatic leader Jacob Zumas into a real flesh and blood party with structures and a manifesto and a constitution. Floyd Shivambu had done this before to great success for the EFF, and so he did it for the MK Party. Seems like he did a pretty good job. At least they have a manifesto now or a constitution, and they have structures, but Floyd got into a bit of trouble, fought with Duduzile Zuma, Jacob's daughter, as I always say, and this is one of my most quoted phrases, by the way. I don't know how this happened, but like so many people online always say, in a family business, if you're not family, you're not in business. I think I said that once exactly, but that's become a thing. Floyd Shivambu was eventually basically put on the plank and allowed to walk himself from the MK Party, as far as I can tell. And then did that cute thing that South African politicians do, where they pretend that they're not going to start a political party. They're just finding out if they should, and they go consult with the people, and then they inevitably just do start a political party. Mashaba did with Action SA. Floyd did it. We all knew, even before he left MK, there were rumors he was going to start a party called Mayibuye. They needed the Mayibuye consultation process, and now ta-da! Like a magic trick, where it's not magic because you knew exactly what was going to happen. We now have the Afrika Mayibuye Movement. Two things I will say just to start. One, after Floyd Shivambu left the EFF, he said that he was misled about certain political leaders in South Africa, specifically Jacob Zuma. He said he was misled. And people went, okay, you were misled. How were you duped? This great brainiac mind genius of like African liberation and South African politics. How were you duped about this? And then he was duped again. When he left MK, he was duped again. He'd been misled again. So you have to have serious questions about whether or not you trust his judgment at all. Those are things to remember as we get into AMM and the significant, let's just say, shared values and logo between AMM, the Afrika Mayibuye Movement, and the EFF and the MK Party. Two parties who Floyd broadly around about said like he'd been duped about one set of leadership or another, and he was completely wrong about people he'd bashed in the past, and now is more aligned on something else. Okay, let's talk about the Afrika Mayibuye Movement. I became real white at the second of that word. Mayibuye, which means return. Obviously, very, very famous struggle song, arguably most famously sung by Mary Makeba. The Afrika Mayibuye Movement's whole shtick is we are going to try and return Africa to a sense of former glory through broadly leftism, socialism, communism. In their manifesto, there's a whole list of international strategic allies, and a lot of them are just communist parties and socialist states from around the world. But at the same time, they want to, in their words, restore the power's influence of religious leaders and traditional leaders by putting them into formal government administration and giving them power over the country, something that they say is decolonial because it goes back to a time before colonization where religious and traditional leaders had power and influence. I would like to flag a few ironies. One, any communist party in the world virtually would say that we need to disempower people put in power by small groups and their belief systems to be given unfettered influence without being elected or being judged on their merits. And so most communist and socialist parties in the world are vehemently anti-religion and anti-giving religion a place in formal power structures because they see religion as a way to control the masses, suppress people, placate them, and make them behave even when it's not in their best interest. Another irony is the fact that the People's Republic of China is flagged by AMM as one of the great allies and inspirations in their manifesto. Do you know what the People's Republic of China did and continues to do to formal education? Wipe it out and suppress it and remove its power and influence in the face of its broader interventionist socialist policies. So there are already some things in there that I'm really not sure about. But the grand irony of the Afrika Mayibuye movement also is the fact that they want to somehow be different, believe that they are different from the EFF and the MK Party, but their two signature ideas are owned politically in South Africa by the EFF and the MK Party. So the MK Party wants to restore traditional and religious leaders or put them in parliament, give them enormous power. We talked before about the weirdness of, say, having a Xhosa king, a Basotho king, and a Zulu king all together making decisions over tens of millions of not Basotho, not Xhosa, and not Zulu people in South Africa, unelected, alongside elected representatives in a democracy. It would also be extremely ironic to have religious leaders in parliament ruling over not just people who are not a part of that religion, but even not part of their part of that religion. Like the Anglican Archbishop being in parliament and Catholics going what am I supposed to do with this? So it's already really bizarre. The other thing that they want is ownership of key sectors in big business, which is an EFF thing. I'm not saying that MK or EFF get to exclusively own this stuff, but when we are talking about how Afrika Mayibuye Movement could be different, when we think about whether or not it could be successful, kind of important to figure out if it has a unique offering. Because let me tell you, Julius Malema and Jacob Zumas are infinitely more successful, charismatic, more electable, have been voted for many, many more times. Way, way, way more powerful in the voting electorate than Floyd Shivambu, who has never been the face of an election campaign, let alone one that has won votes. And so if AMM's offering is essentially we are combo MK, EFF, and we have Floyd, it seems unlikely they're going to pull very many votes from what seems to clearly be their target voter bases who are people voting for MK and the EFF already. Now, I suspect that even if Floyd really does think that the religious leaders and traditional leaders should be in parliament, he is also making a strategic choice similar to what MK did by going, one way that we get votes is we woo religious and traditional leaders who want more power and influence for themselves. And then those religious and traditional leaders will go to their flocks, their constituents, and say, vote for this party so we as a collective can get more power, influence, and privileges. So he may, in a very, very, cynical way, just be picking people of influence, religious and traditional leaders in society, trying getting them in the fold so that to get them to tell their constituents to vote for AMM, which, by the way, is exactly what MK did. And then MK has not empowered traditional leaders. And so traditional leaders are getting more and more upset with the MK party, and maybe Floyd sees an opportunity for himself there. So kind of AMM at the moment in their current manifestation, look, I will say that manifesto was an extraordinary amount of hot air, liberally using all caps to try and be impressive. It was like, total political freedom now and economic freedom. I'm only speaking like this because it was all caps for all people now, and social and cultural freedom now. Like it was just like, and it was all like, we will mobilize the masses and we will get Africa united, but like next to no actual, this is how we're going to do it. So they did the land ownership thing. They did the intervention and ownership of major sectors thing, like mining. We've seen this playbook before with the EFF, the MK party. They did religious leaders and traditional leaders. They did free education and skills training, which is good, but they didn't explain how exactly it would happen. In fact, Eric, you pointed out that when they were talking about education, on one line of the manifesto, it looked like they were going to provide free, helpful skills and education to people until post-grad. And then the next line, it almost felt like it might include post-grad.
Yeah, it was until post-grad in the one sentence, and then the other one was through post-grad.
Yeah.
Which is odd, because it's literally the next sentence.
Really, really unclear. So they did try and offer that. Now, free education is something, ironically, that the EFF is pushing right now. They're literally trying to get student debt cancelled for, in their estimation, nearly 300,000 students crippled by financial debt. I think it said for their first degree. We'll do a big show on that later this week. So again, like, what is the new thing that you are offering? So we read further into this manifesto, and there was further hot air. And frankly, I just don't believe. I understand that a manifesto's goal is to lay out what you can expect from a party. And there were things like, we will be friends with Cuba and China and these like countries. We see these people as strategic allies. I get all of that. But you've got to tell us what, if you got into power, you would want to do. It's not enough to say we'll be the champions of women and disabled people and the youth and stuff. Literally everybody says that in their own words. Every manifesto says that. And so what we literally wrote down was land and business ownership and intervention by government, religious and traditional leaders and administration, and then free education up until or through post-grad. I don't know. We are the close reading podcast, so maybe we overly closely read, but I actually just think it was unclear.
Yeah, it's weird because they used the word through, but they did say through to post-grad. So like, I don't know if they're using the to as like an up until kind of thing, but it's
not ideal for a manifesto to require this level of interpretation. And then, ironically, from two guys with postgrads. But then here's something. So they dedicated a whole section to this, and Eric, going back to what you were saying about the Shepherd Bashiri stuff, people in the north of the country are particularly affected by or worried about and beset by undocumented immigration. So they had a whole section about undocumented immigration, which I think shows the significance they perceive amongst potential voters for this point. So they said three things broadly about undocumented immigration. One, they're against it, which I think tries to take advantage of Julius Malema's kind of like open borders, no open borders, no open borders, no open borders, Africa united, South Africans kind of first a bit kind of tension over the years that Julius Malema, I think it is fair to say the EFF has suffered over. So they say they're against undocumented immigration, but they, if they were in power, wouldn't deny anyone, including undocumented migrants, basic human needs, which is great. But it's also already the law in South Africa. But then the next line is quite interesting. They say, we'll criminalize employers of undocumented migrants. Now, that is interesting because imagine now you are living in a South Africa where you're an employer, and a key function of what you need to do to hire someone is not only to see their papers, but to be able to, beyond reasonable doubt, fact check them to the point where you go, cool, this is a documented migrant living in South Africa. And that is something where I think they're trying to appeal to people. Because I think a core issue, like a lot of people talk about and worry about the extent to which undocumented migrants commit crimes beyond being undocumented here. But what people really worry about is losing job opportunities and not being able to work and getting work in their own country because undocumented migrants have work. And we've spoken before about how you can understand why some employers seek out undocumented migrants. You can pay them less. They don't have legal protections. There's a huge power imbalance, which means that they're probably willing to work for very little and very long hours and poor working conditions because they aren't citizens here and they aren't documented and they don't have the kind of ability to call out and take an employer to task. They're fearful of doing that. And so that's AMM's attempt to try and offer something to people who are upset about undocumented migrants and employers. But that's kind of it. Aside from the logo, which, by the way, is such a carbon copy of the EFF's logo, it's a joke. Like, honestly, the Afrika Mayibuye Movement logo is Africa and a black fist with red color on it. And it's got a star. It's just not on Africa. It's above Africa. And it's got red and green. And the fist is holding a spear, which becomes a pen on the one side. But aside from that, like, it's the same. Like, even the look and feel of that fist is the same. The fist, by the way, is just not holding the pen properly. Nobody writes like that. Even without free education, nobody writes like that. The fingers aren't even coiled around the pen. It's like trying to watch someone use chopsticks for the first time. It's just like absolutely wrong. And unfortunately, as some people have pointed out online, it looks exactly like the Heineken logo. Like the Heineken logo in terms of colors and stars and spacing and circle, it's what it looks like. It looks like, ironically, somebody tried to draw the EFF logo from memory after too many Heinekens. Like that's probably where it came from.